Good morning, Morai Rabotai, Shavua Tov. We are continuing on Masechet Avodah Zarah, and we are starting the second perek on Daf Chaf Bet, Amud Aleph, the bottom of the Amud. Today's Amud is being learned first and foremost for the well-being and safety of Achenu Bet Yisrael, B'chol Makom Shehem, and especially for the Matzav in Eretz Yisrael, that Hakadosh Baruch Hu should be merachem, and the war that's going on should be a zchut for all of those who are in danger, that they should be safe, B'ezrat Hashem, and matzliach in the difficult war that we are facing, and it's just started. Today's Amud is also being learned. Zchut Yeshua ben Diana, Yael bat Rivka, Menashe ben Asi, and for Ilui Neshama, Menashe ben Yaakov, and Sadaf Simcha bat Faribat Ila Eden, Abraham bat Ben Esther, and Farzanet Diana bat Victoria, that the Neshamot should have an aliyah. Amen. Zarah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihya b'dvaro. So our perek is going to speak about a lot of very interesting things. All of the sugyot that you see, different kolelim learn, of pat akum, bishul akum, of yain nesech, all of those are going to be in our perek. It's a very important and halachic perek, but we start with something that's also semi-relevant, and that's the isur of yichud with the goyim, and even dealing with animals. There are those still who have horses or they have farms, and you leave your assets as be it if you own a farm, or if you have goyim taking care of it, or if you have a horse, you own a horse, and you're not taking it to the residential area over here in Beverly Hills, you have them in wherever they keep them, and that's your asset over there. The Mishnah seems to say that could be a problem. Says the Mishnah, "En ma'amidin be'ema bepundikaot shel ovdei kochavim mipnei shechashudin al harevi'ah." There is an isur of a person, a ben Noach, sleeping cohabitation with animals is asur not just for Jews, it's also asur for the goyim, for bnei Noach, because every min has to be davek b'mino, and hence going with different species of creatures is a prohibited act for the goyim, and hence, if I am facilitating that will be a problem for me. It will be a problem of lifnei aiver lo titen michshol, putting a stumbling block in front of a blind. We spoke about this in prior dapim, in Daf Vav, in Daf Tet Vav, of giving an animal to a goy in a case that it could be brought for Avodah Zarah as a tikrovet of Avodah Zarah, and hence here is a very similar issue when you give an animal that he could now do an averah with the animal, right? So the Gemara is going to go back and forth and contrast this with the Mishnayot, the Toseftot, and the Braitot that we have had before, and they are found elsewhere as well, to try to actually define this isur, where it applies, where it doesn't apply, and we'll B'ezrat Hashem also try to understand if it's applicable nowadays in our time. So says the Mishnah, En ma'amidin be'ema bepundekaot shel ovdei kochavim mipnei shechashudin al harevi'ah. We can't leave animals bepundekaot shel ovdei kochavim, in a pundak, a motel of oved kochavim, because they are chashud, they are suspected on having relations even with animals. Now again, nowadays you'll do a proper research, you'll find that still we're talking about in farm settings and so on and so forth. You're talking about close to 10% that people could be involved in this activity. So it's not something that's out of norm even nowadays, and perhaps in the time of Chazal was even perhaps a bigger problem. So it says the Mishnah, "Ve'lo tityahed isha imahem mipnei shechashudin al harayot." It's not just with that, but even with a woman, a Jewish woman should not be mityahed with them. Now the language is different. By the first one, it says you should not be in ma'amidin behema bepundekaot shelakum. What does that mean? That means, like the Ravan is going to say later on, the isur is not if you 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you want to leave your animal and go get a coffee and come back and pick up your donkey or your cow, that would be asur. It's not asur. And ma'amidin means it has to be ma'amid. It's not the isur of yichud, but rather you're leaving your animal there for a substantial amount of time, right? It's not just. And why the pundekaot? Pundekaot has, as the Rishonim, the Ritba writes, that the pundak has the reverse chidush. The chidush of the pundak is, usually in a pundak is not a barn, right? Pundak is a motel. And motel, people could be barging in, most of the time, there are people there. People bringing in new animals, taking new animals, the guy could come. And even so, says the Ritba, if it's a place that you're now left your animal there, it's not for 5 minutes, it's overnight, like the Ravan says. Ravan says the Isur is when it's overnight. When you're leaving your animal there overnight, it's a problem. Already you have to be concerned. So therefore the language of the Mishnah by the animal is not en meyahedin. There's no Isur yichud necessarily per se, but it's a Isur of en ma'amidin. If you are putting your animal there for a night, it's more of a bederech kavua, then it's a problem. Versus a woman, the woman should not be mityahed. Is isur of yichud with Avodah Avodah Zarah. Right now, this is of course explained in the Gemara, mainly in Masachet Kiddushin, Daf Pe and Pe Aleph, at the very end of Masachet Kiddushin, although the parameters and details of this, and we're going to discuss a little bit of it over here in our Masachet as well. Bezrat Hashem in the upcoming Dapim. Velo yityached, the third din of the Mishnah is Velo yityached adam imahem mipnei shechashudin al shfichut damim. And a regular person should also not have yichud with them, because it's not just Avodah Zarah that we had in the beginning of the Masechta and Gilui Arayot in the beginning of this Mishnah, but they're also Chashud, and the third one, An Shfichut Damim. When you have, especially back in a time when you couldn't really follow up, there was no cameras and no fingerprints and no DNA testing and so on and so forth. These things were much more, unfortunately, prevalent. You had a person going on a travel and they would never get to their destination and they would never be found. They would just go missing, right? And many of these people were, the Lachadodi of Shlomo Al-Kabetz was murdered in his place of Hitpudedut by an Arab. Speaking about the horrors, heinous acts that we have seen and heard in past few hours. These are things that from time immemorial they've been there. So therefore, it's Isur of Yichud. Actually, there's a whole sugya of whether or not a person is allowed to get a haircut from a Oved Avodah Zarah, from a barber. That's Oved Avodah, because once he's at it and he has your neck and he has a razor also in his hand, who knows what he's going to do? And these were unfortunately serious questions. Now, Baruch Hashem, maybe a little bit different. Still, going to a Jewish barber still is a thing. Very simply would be just supporting a Jewish business. Sifri writes for the darshins from a pasuk of Kano miyad amitecha, that the person should be giving the Jews the business, right? If you have an option, and the Chafetz Chaim writes, even if it's a little bit more expensive, it doesn't have to be necessarily equal prices and equal situations. Even if it's a little bit more expensive, a little bit more out of the way, still have to do it. Again, that's something to be spoken about, but nevertheless, those are the three dinim, the halachot of the Mishnah. En ma'amidin be'ema bepundakaot shel akum. You cannot leave your animal with the avodah zarah. B lo yityahed isha imahen. A woman should not be mityahed with them because they're chashud al arayot. And finally, even a man should not be mityahed with them alone because they are chashud on shvichut damim. Fine, says the Gemara.
Why does it have to mention the woman? I mean, there's laws of yichud even with the Jewish man. So what's the relevance there? Why not just skip the second one, say, and no person should be secluded with idol worshippers? And because we already know that a woman can't be alone with a Jewish man.
Well, the Gemara is going to speak about this a little bit, but for just a simple answer would be, there are certain things that for a Jewish man would be mutar to be mityached, right? For instance, you have a man that's ishto imo, right? The Gemara there in Masachet Kiddushin writes that if you have a man that his wife is with him, right, then there's no isur yechud because his wife keeps him, his wife guards him, right? But if a goy, the wife of a goy does not, they're perutzin ba'arayot. They don't care, right? It's not considered a shmirah, right? So for instance, we have these home visits, right, of people who are chiropractors, they're speech therapists, they're the therapy realm and arena of things. It will be involving people going for house visits, right? So you have the house visit of a person that his wife is there. By a Jew would be mutar. By a goy, not necessarily, right? So that will be, these are questions that people who are in these industries, they should be asking. And the reverse of it is really true as well. If you go to somebody's house, right? You go to somebody's house, you're a computer technician, you're a plumber, you are whatever it is that you are, right? And you go to somebody's home to fix their computer, their piping, whatever it is that they need help with, and you're entering their home and there's only the woman there. Mutar or asur? Well, very much depends on where the husband is. The Gemara there says, if it's ba'ala ba'ir, if the husband is in town, then it's mutar. If it's not ba'ala ba'ir, then it would be asur. And what is considered the ir? Los Angeles is the largest city in the world. So Beverly Hills to Los Angeles, is that considered two different cities? Or let's say Los Angeles over here with Sherman Oaks in the valley, is it considered the same city? Even though that's the same city, it's an hour apart maybe, and so on and so forth. What is considered, for instance, from Heinemann holds that the neighborhood, a city, is considered something that you care enough to advertise for your business through there. People still come. It's considered the same larger, greater neighborhood. That's a city, right? But if you don't advertise from here to, Thousand Oaks, so that's already maybe a different city. So if you live here and you work in Thousand Oaks, or vice versa, so that's considered yichud already. As this from computer technician, a friend of mine, that when he got home calls to go fix someone's computer, he would first ask us, where does your husband work? And she was like, what do you care about my husband's work? I said, well, I have to know if the door has to be ajar or you can close the door, if it's ba'ala ba'ir or if it's not ba'ala ba'ir. Right? So there are many different, or for instance, for Ashkenazim will make a bigger difference. There's machloket Maran and Rema as far as what is a mutter scenario of yichud. I'll give you an example. And Gemara says in Daf Pei Aleph that over there that Shnei Anashim Ksharim, right? Braita says, Mishnah says, is mutar. If you have two kosher men with one woman, that's not a scenario of yichud. Now, it's granted that this is not certainly not a scenario that's the oraita. The oraita is one on one, but at the same time, Gemara brings this story of Rav and Rav Yehuda, his student, that they were going in a place that there was no one else besides them, and they see this woman And Rav tells his student, Rav Yehuda, says, Dal kareh mikameh geinam. He says, this is a geinam situation. It's a yichud situation. Let's get out of this and part ways or get ahead. And Rav Yehuda says, well, 2 kosher people, 1 woman is mutar. You taught me that. He says, 2 kosher people, me and you are not kosher. He's talking about like the Gemara earlier on in Daf Yudchet. And this became, actually, you laugh about it, but this became a machloket rishonim. Rambam paskins the Gemara at its face value that Rav and Rav Yehuda would not be considered halachically kosher for this. He's talking about people who stood in tests of this area and this and that. But the Ramah and Shulchan Aruch paskins for us, Sfaradim Shulchan Aruch paskins like the Rambam, and on the other hand, Ramah paskins like other Rishonim who say no, Rav was just being very humble and Hasid. He was a Hasid. Midat Hasidut is to be Mahmir, but Mikaradin Mutar. So you see, there are a lot of intricacies and details of Yichud Yichud without getting into all of those. Over here, the Mishnah says a woman and a goy, that's a no-go. Right? Because they're hashudin al arayot. And again, a goyim, if they don't have their reputation online and it's not dangerous for them, they're not only chashud on pitui, but they're also chashud on ones. In other words, when we talk about the sugya of yichud in Masechet Kiddushin by a Jew between Jews, we are not talking about rape. We're talking about pitui, of getting into a situation that one thing leads to another, and then an unfortunate situation could happen without rape. But by goyim, we're unfortunately talking about a much higher scenario of arayot. Chashudin al arayot means rape as well. So says the Gemara. So we mentioned the first din of the Mishnah, En ma'amidin be'ema bepundakaot shel ovdei kochavim. You cannot leave your animal with a goyim. The Gemara says, seriously? You can't leave because they're going to sleep with your animal? So guess what happens if you sleep with an animal? Can you buy that animal for a korban? Absolutely not. It's pasul for korban. Now, would that follow the halacha that you shouldn't be able to buy an animal if you're going to Bet HaMikdash for Sharosh Regalim? Can I stop by a goy and buy his animal and take it to Bet HaMikdash? Can I or not? The din is you can. How in the world is it mutar to take their animal for a korban when you just told me that they're hashudin al haraviyah? Urmini, the Tosefta tells us in Perek Bet Halacha Aleph, you can buy from a goy vendor an animal for korban. How in the world does that Tosefta goes with our Mishnah if they're chashudin al arayot? Right? If they are like Bil'am harasha im machshemo shata oseli yishut balelot, that they sleep with their animals, then how can you buy ever an animal from a goy for korban? And the Tosefta says, we are not concerned. Lo mishum rovea. We're not concerned that the goy male slept with female or female slept with male. Velo mishum nirva. Velo mishum muktzeh. And we're not also concerned about muktzeh. This muktzeh does not mean the muktzeh on Shabbat. Means that the goy dedicated and designated this animal shehikzahu veyichedahu leakravat avodat kochavim. I said, this animal, I'm taking it to this fat naked man tomorrow morning, and then overnight he changed his mind. That would be muktzeh. That they designated the animal to be tikrovet avodah Zarah, and then they changed their mind, but that would be already a problem, right? A tikrovet avodah zarah you cannot have. So says the Tosefta, the last in velo mishum nevad. And also we're not concerned that this actual thing was, you want to buy this white beautiful cow, but you happen to be in India amongst our Hindu brothers, right? And you're hoshesh that this animal maybe they were getting bracha. You've seen the things they get. They put their foot on their head and they get bracha from them. Right? Yivarecha Hashem v'yishmerecha. And they have this all. I'm not gonna go very, more than that. What they drink and what they do tevilat kerach in. That's pretty distasteful and disgusting. But or buy that type of a thing from a goy, the bright the Tosef. That's you could do it. We're not choshesh that this guy was bowing down to this cow 5 minutes ago. We're not choshesh. So Gemara says, well, that I understand, because if a goy would have made this either tikrovet avodah zarah or avodah zarah itself, he would have never sold it to you. That much honesty and integrity to their avodah zarah they have. If there's something they chose for avodah zarah, no way they're going to sell it. If something was a tikrovet avodah zarah, no way they would change their mind, right? But roveh v'nirva, if the guy slept with the animal, why aren't you choshesh for that? Why aren't you concerned for that? Says the Gemara. Bishlama muktzeh v'nevad. I understand why muktzeh v'nevad is not an issue. Deim ita the akseye veim ita the palche. If he would have served it, or if he would have, arranged this for tikrovet avodah zarah, lo ava masbele. No way he would have sold it, right? Ela roveh v'nirva lachush. But cohabitation, why are you not concerned for that? Amar of Tachrifa, Amar of Shila, Bar Avina, Mishmei Derav. The Gemara answers, Oved Kochavim Chas al Behemto Shelo Te'aker. A goy cares about the animal that's under his ownership, that they should not be physically damaged. Now, the common belief back then, I'm not sure the medical understanding of nowadays, but the common belief back then was that different types of creatures, sleeping cohabitation of different creatures, different species, would actually damage and in some cases disable their ability of procreation, and therefore they would not want to do that, because if their behemah is going to become akara, right? Rani akara lo yaralda, it will become a problem, and Hashem Yirahem, it will not become a asset that's worth its money, and hence they will not do it. Says the Gemara, Hatenach nekevot. That's only for female animals. Zecharimai, a zachar does not become akar if he sleeps with a human being. So says the Gemara, the zachar also, Amar of Kana, ho'ilu machsham bebasar, they will be physically weakened, because again you're doing this cohabitation really weakens their basar, and their nature does not match the nature of human beings, and therefore even a zachar will be damaged. Now it can't necessarily become an akar, but it will still be damaged physically. So therefore they would never sleep with their own animals. If they have an opportunity to sleep with an animal that doesn't belong to them, they'll do it. But their own animals, not necessarily. Can it happen? Yeah, but we're not choshesh. We're not worried that's going to happen. Hence, you could buy for korban. So says the Gemara, we learned in a different Tosefta that you could also buy from a shepherd. Now, shepherd doesn't own it himself. He shepherds other people's animals. And let's say if Muhammad has an animal with Paul, right? And you want to buy it from Paul, but it belongs to a different person. So that should be a problem. It doesn't belong to the ro'eh. You're buying it through a third party who is keeping them, but you're buying it from the owner. That should be certainly a problem. Mara says, why aren't we choshesh? Why aren't we choshesh that the shepherd did something to it? It's not his animal. Mara says, mityare mishum hefset sachar. They are afraid because if the owner gets a wind of what has happened, he's not going to pay them a penny. The Gemara says, if that's correct, So why does the Braita say, En Muslim b'male ro'eh shelahen? Why can't I, the Jew, give my animal to a goyish shepherd? Right? If you tell me that they're afraid of the owners, so why isn't he afraid of me? Right? The Gemara says, because us, the Jews, we're never going to chap. We're not going to understand what they could do. The goyim themselves were involved with these things. They're very tuned in, and the guy is scared from his own kind because that's how their mindset works. But a nation that doesn't do this type of stuff, they're not tuned into these things. So therefore, the guy says, the Jew will never know these types of things, right? And therefore, he's not afraid. The Gemara says, they know each other's tricks, so therefore they are very much tuned in, and because of that, they are afraid. Us that we don't know the intricacies of these types of things, and we don't know how it's done, they are not afraid of us. Amar Rabba, this is what people say, a metal tool that they would use to etch on a stone, to write on a stone. The stone is afraid of this metal tool because it knows that even though that I'm stone, this guy is tougher than me, right? This tool could be chipping away from me because it's stronger. So even a strong thing is afraid of a stronger thing, right? So here also the goyim, they are like this, but they know that the other goy could be tougher than me, and therefore they just don't try it altogether. But with the Jew, they are not afraid. So says the Gemara, Ragla b'chavrei yada, also a slanderer, a person that's a rachil, knows his friend who also is a rachil. So they know each other, and therefore they are careful. Says the Gemara, if you are correct, everything that I just intook from you should come out, that we should also zecharim minekevot lo nizbun nechashinan dilma v'rava aleh. Right? Should not buy an animal who is zachar from a nekeva, because maybe she was doing cohabitation with this animal. So says the Gemara, no, it's not a problem. Kevan de migriba mirteta. You know what happens if she sleeps with the animal? The animal is going to be walking after her all the time, and people will see it and say, oh, something fishy is going on over here, and therefore she will be ashamed and will never do it, right? So says the Gemara, we learned that a almana, someone that doesn't have a husband, should not have a dog at home. Should not have a dog, right? No, should not be raising dogs. And also, a young boy should not be hosted, dorming basically, or what do they call it? When you're out of town and you're staying with them, boarding, right? You should not be boarding and dorming, staying with ushpiza of a almana, of a woman that doesn't have a husband. So Bishlama Barbarav Sniale. We understand why a young boy should not be doing it, because a young boy, if something goes wrong and something chas v'shalom happens immoral, he's not going to say anything, she's not going to say anything, therefore we are concerned about it. But a dog, it should be a problem, right? So says the Gemara, or shouldn't be a problem, because the dog is not going to be sanua about it, right? The dog is going to be running after her all the time. And therefore, we should not be choshesh that she's going to do something with the dog because she will be embarrassed. So why is it a problem? It shouldn't be a problem. Says the Gemara, Ela kalba kevan de mikrabe mirtata. It should be not a problem, because if something happens, the dog is going to be running after her, and therefore she should be afraid of that and not do anything. Therefore, should be mutar. Says the Gemara, "Keva dechishad yele umtza umisracha batre memar amri inshi hayde misracha batre mishub umtza." Says no. If she is raising a dog at home, right? So then there are two ways that the animal would be running after her. A is if there's tashmish. B is if she's constantly giving food. So when they see the animal running after her, they'll say, well, it's because he's hungry, the animal it's hungry, and she's the source of food, and therefore it's running after. So therefore, no one is going to know really what the reason is, and she's not going to be ashamed of it, and hence the isur of, we have to talk about all of these things, right? Halachically speaking, is it mutar to have a dog altogether? Right? Is it mutar for a woman that doesn't have a husband to have a dog? And sometimes those are actually the people who need the dog for protection. They're scared to walk at night in the streets, or just to be alone at home for intruders and so on and so forth. So what exactly do we do with this Gemara is something that we're going to talk about. Let's just finish this up over here. So it says the Gemara, nekevot etzel nekevot mai tamalo. So if that's the case, a nekeva with a nekeva should be mutar. In other words, you should be able to put your animal, your female cow, with a female goya that doesn't have a husband. Well, why is that not a heter? Why should that be a problem? And the Gemara says, Amar mor ukva bar chama mipnei sha'ovdei kochavim mitzuyin esel neshei chaverehen, because the goyim, the other goyim, they come to pay visit to the women of either married or not married, doesn't make a difference, of other women for immoral purposes. And once they're there, sometimes they come and the woman is not there or is not available, they find this animal and Hashem yirachem, right? פעמים שאינו מוצאה, הוא מוצא את הבהמה ורובעה והיא באה איתם. Sometimes, even if the woman is there, אפילו מוצאה נמי רובעה, still the animal would not be safe. תאמר מור, חביבה עליהם בהמתן של ישראל, יותר מנשותיהן. Is this thing, desire towards animals. And the Ramban talks about this. The Ramban says that a person sometimes, if you don't control your desires. Today you desire a kosher married woman for yourself with chuppah v'kiddushin, and if you don't control that, then at some point that's not a desire. You desire something that's asur. Ma'im giruvim imtaku. You want to have nashim asurot, and if you don't curve, you don't control your ta'ava there. At some point, even that's not going to cut it, and you would want mishkav zachor. And if you don't control that, at some point you will want the mishkav avima. And then Ramban says this is something that 10 years earlier, 5 years earlier, when you started this path, you would have never thought that you would get there. That's how the ta'ava works. But here, the Rishonim explained that it's also because of, it's not just the behemah of the Jews, it is behemah period, because as the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan, b'shashva nachash al chava, the people have a zuhama of nachash inside, but animals don't have that, so hence an extra attraction there. But the Jews don't have the zuhama, because Israel shamdu al har Sinai paska zuhamatan, but ovdei kochavim shelo amdu al har Sinai lo paska zuhamatan, and hence you have this issue with animals as well. Bezrat Hashem, we will continue this in the days to come.
Wow.